So I'm delighted to welcome to the studio Denis Dullea. You head up the research and development side for Ericsson down in Athlone. So I am welcome to the studio, first of all.
Thank you.
I'm going to kick off by asking you to tell us about Ericsson today. So Ericsson globally, and maybe more specifically Ericsson in Ireland.
Yeah, Ericsson globally, we are a company that works in the kind of telco industry. Our mission is to connect people. We're almost 150 years old, 149 years old, 150 celebration is next year. And I suppose the way I look at Ericsson and the way I try to articulate what we do to people here is we carry about 40% of the mobile traffic in the world. If you've used a mobile device to make a call or watch a YouTube or whatever, anywhere in the world, then the most likely situation is that you use Ericsson equipment in that call. So from what your mobile phone will communicate with an antenna, which will communicate with a radio, which will communicate with a baseband, with a core, which is managed by software. We produce the end-to-end infrastructure from the antenna backwards, basically. So we haven't been in mobile phones with some time, but the rest of the infrastructure for mobile telephony or mobile connectivity, we are a network infrastructure provider. We would sell to companies all over the world, your Vodafones, your Trees, your Airs, your AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, etc. Then in Athlone, if I just go back to that kind of analogy of if you've used a mobile, you've used Ericsson equipment, and that Ericsson equipment has been managed by software produced in Athlone. So most likely, you have actually been indirectly supported by software we produce in Athlone when you've been using your mobile device.
Very good, and I'm going to come back to Ericsson, but I do want to get a little bit of a sense of yourself first, if that's okay. So would you mind telling me a little bit about your journey to where you are today?
Yeah, so my journey starts, I suppose, from childhood, really. So I'm from Cork, West Cork man. I'm from a family farm in West Cork. I grew up in a farm, dairy farm with horses. Never lost the farming gene, so I'm a part-time farmer now as well as the day job. I have a few Irish draft horses. My Ericsson career started about 27 years ago. I like to tell a story of my father turned to me one day around September after I finished college and said, "When are you going to get a job?" And I said, "But I have one," which was helping out in the farm. And he said, "No, I meant a real one." And subsequently, I applied for some jobs and I was recruited by Ericsson. So I started there in November '99. Started in a maintenance department. Worked there for a few years. Then we made a major technology shift within Athlone at the time, where we moved out some kind of Ericsson proprietary technologies, Plex programming languages, AXE work, and moved into the OSS domain, or the management domain, which is the domain we're still in today, say 24, 25 years later. I moved into that area also in the maintenance side of things and in the testing side of things. And I suppose about 5 years in, I took on my first leadership role as a project manager, starting as a project manager of maintenance, then became a project manager for the major development projects. And then about 2012-ish timeframe, I was due to go abroad with my family, and that got cancelled for a reason. And that kind of led me then into line management. The next move was another move on the local site in Athlone in about 2012. Did a kind of an operations role there at that time. And then around 2014, I applied for a job in Sweden. And subsequent to move there with my family, my wife and 3 children, and spent 6 years in Sweden with my family from there to 2020. And then as different roles there as well. And I suppose that's where Ericsson, as I say, is a global company with 100,000 people. There's a great opportunity to expand your horizons like that and to really kind of go on those kind of adventures and I suppose from a leadership perspective then as well, build your network and build your brand as you go through your career. So I would have met some really good people in Sweden. I did kind of couple of jobs, short-term jobs, you could say, on both sides of. But my main job in the middle was I did about 3.5 years working in a program office role or leading a program office for 5G. So, and that project team that I would have been leading delivered the world's first 5G call, basically. So, if you're using 5G connectivity from Ericsson, then the team that I would have been involved in leading at that time would have built that software. So that was directly in the kind of core business of Ericsson. Then I suppose I got an opportunity towards the end of 2019 to apply for the job of the head of the unit in Athlone, which was at the time OSS's network management now and the R&D site. I applied for that, went through an interview process, and I started there on the 1st of July 2020. So I started in the middle of COVID.
Timing.
Exactly. Now, my family had moved back a year earlier, so my family were at home, but I was traveling over and back for that final year. So I had an apartment in Sweden that I had to go over and clear out in June 2020. I can tell you airports were very quiet in June 2020.
Oh, yes.
There was no, the bus from the long-term car park that runs, there was no bus, it was a taxi. You parked the car, went to the thing, called a number, and got a taxi from the car park to the terminal. So I'm basically in Athlone in 5 years, running this job, or running the site and running the engineering unit, and we deliver that kind of management portfolio for mobile networks. It's a global mandate that we have there. We're end-to-end responsible for the engineering of the network management business.
And I mean, from those various leadership roles, what does a good leader look like in your view, or what kind of a leader would you like to see yourself as?
Yeah, I think a lot about leadership. Actually, I think a lot about organizational structures as well. It's one of the things that really kind of I spent a lot of time thinking about and tuning. I myself would regard myself as a leader who now I try to be quite enabling. So I try to what would you say? How would I put this in the best way now? But I try to give accountability and autonomy. Now I like information, so if some of my leaders were leading here, they say no, he also likes to control things. But actually, I don't really see it like that. I see that I have to be in control of my mandate for my leadership, because that's what's expected. But how I enable my team to execute their mandate, I'm quite empowering, I would say. So I would hope that I would be perceived as quite an empowering leader. Now that would have transitioned from a long way from where I was beginning as a project manager, where you have this kind of responsibility. But Sweden played a big part in that kind of change. One of the things that happened in Sweden is when I can remember one of my early engagements with somebody, I asked them to do something. And I came back about 2 weeks later and says, I asked you to do that, what's going on? And he said, yeah, I did it. And I went, what do you mean? I didn't go, what do you mean? But what went on in my head was the Swedish culture was so different. Like when you asked somebody to do it, they did it as they would in art, but they never gave you that kind of, they told that they'd come back and circle back and say they had it done. So you change your leadership styles as you go through work with different cultures. So I regard myself to be quite empowering, quite enabling, give a lot of autonomy. And then I believe in having very clear kind of, I call it like a strategic direction. I don't believe in defining the path to that strategic direction very detailed, because you can't tell what a path to a place in 3 years' time is. What you want to do is say, I want to be moving in a direction. And then you assess at the end of the year, did we do a good job or a bad job of moving in that direction? Especially when you're leading in an organizational context of trying to continuously improve as you deliver. Deliveries are slightly different. They're managed quite tightly. You have to deliver on your customer commitments in a particular roadmap. But when you're leading an organization, you also want to lead it to improve continuously. And that's where you talk about what your strategic ambitions are. And I would say on both a site and the engineering unit, which I would have a dual role in that perspective, we would kind of have mission statements. We spend quite a bit of time setting mission statements, and those and setting kind of like an overall set of strategic objectives that we have, and they just guide your thinking. So, uh, so I believe in that kind of like getting people on the same page, empowering them and enabling them to take you where we all agree we need to go. Not where I think we need to go, but where we all believe we need to go.
I like that idea of the vision being nearly more important than the path.
Yes.
That's very clever. And I mean, the work you guys are doing there down in Athlone, just tell us a little bit more about that. I mean, maybe a little bit more about the evolution of 5G. Is AI affecting your work?
Yeah. So I suppose in I start because I mentioned the company is nearly 150 years old. We're just over 50 years in Athlone. We celebrated 50 years last year, so we're in our 51st year. One of the big things that you have to do when you have this kind of longevity as a company is you have to continuously evolve. So I think what we see is that technology is always moving. So yes, AI is here today. There'll be something else in 5 years' time. There'll be something else 5 years after that. What we see is the cycles are going faster. But and what we see is that Ericsson has a track record of moving at that speed. When you go to visit other companies, for example, last week we went to see Google, and they're in a leadership summit that I was at, and it's just a completely different company because it's so much younger as a company. But I think one of the things that you have with Ericsson is you have this kind of, we know how to move with technology, we know how to embrace new technologies, and we know how to grow with them. And as a site and as a kind of a site outside of headquarters, that's really, really critical. If you saw, even a couple of weeks ago, we did an announcement of a new investment in openness, basically. And what we see happening in our industry is that this kind of time of having one vendor and your or CSP like a Vodafone or a Tree or an Air or something buying from, or a major US one like say T-Mobile buying from one vendor, those kind of days are that hasn't happened in a long time. It's very few customers that have only one vendor behind them, and then the need to actually improve that kind of interoperability of those functions, because everything is getting more complex. So if you look at the speed that your phone operates at today, if you look at what's on the industry now in terms of VR goggles, or if you look at you see these glasses now that I think are going to be really, really cool. Actually, we saw a demo on one of those last week as well. It's not there yet, but they are actually going to be really cool. The type of load and complexity they add to a mobile network, that drives the need for technology to solve those problems. And I think that's where the solution to lots of these problems lie. So, and one of those kind of technologies then is this kind of, is how we play a major part in that, because we provide the system through which our customers operate their network. So we see a lot of automation capabilities come into our portfolios. So rather than in the past where we would provide a user interface that people would, say, manually execute an action on their network based on an insight that network provider, or an alarm that network raises or something, now we see a lot more need for automation in that space. Yeah. So there is an issue in the network, the system fixes that issue in the network with no need for human interaction. Or when that insight is provided to the operator of the network, the insight is provided with a lot more information that the action is clear. Yeah. And that requires quite an engineering challenge, especially as networks grow, as the number of users of the networks grows, the number of connected devices grow, as the amount of traffic, the amount of information that comes with that traffic that needs to be processed to provide those insights grows.
IDA, our partners on the series, tell me beyond the obvious, how do you work with them? Do you work with them around talent or around sustainability, or?
I suppose as a site in a global company, and not a site, like we're not in Ireland for the corporate tax rate. We're in Ireland for its talent. So. But when you're in a country or in a company like Ericsson, you're also always in competition. I won't say like it's not, what's the word? it's not unconstructive competition. I mean, but you have to hold your kind of position, and you have to keep your mandates. You have to keep working to keep yourself fresh. You have to keep evolving with technology, and one of the things the IDA supports us really with is that kind of when we are evolving with technology. So if I go back to that grant, that investment announcement we made a couple of weeks ago, that's an investment in kind of opening up our portfolio and really transforming the telco industry, really. And we play a major part in that. That's the company strategy, and Athlone plays a major, major role in that. And the IDA now supports us with that. So they support in helping people transition from what they're working on today into that new domain. We also are we would look for new kind of areas. So in the last couple of years, we would have established a new unit as a small unit towards another function in Sweden. It's in the kind of SPS, it's called. It's kind of software services for engineers. So it provides cloud services to the global Ericsson engineering population. It's about 30 people working that now, and the IDA would have supported us in actually getting that off the ground with supports. And part of those supports are not just like monetary, it's also that kind of, they help us meet our executives. So, I mean, bringing, say, even a couple of weeks ago, for when that grant announcement was made, the ET came to Athlone came to Ireland for their ET. And they could have picked any country in Europe, but they picked Ireland. One of the reasons they picked Ireland was because they were here for the 50th, and they met both the IDA and the Minister for Enterprise, Peter Burke. They met him also, and that left, as well as our own people, which was the most impressive part of it, that also left a very positive impression on accessibility to government and accessibility to government agencies. We also work with them in the real estate space. And if I go back to that evolution, they would help us a lot with this kind of transformation in terms of building competence plans and that kind of stuff. And then over the next year or two now, we're going to also invest in kind of, I call it like the future leadership on the site. So like, building a strategic kind of leadership capability on the site, and they're helping us with that as well through engagements with the IMI. So lots of support, lots of dialogue. We try to give back a little bit as well. So we try to support with companies coming and visiting. We try to support with some presentations to them. And we try to support with things like that, kind of recognizing their contribution in the industry and that kind of stuff.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I mean, if you got out your crystal ball, look into the future, what should we be watching out for? Are there any trends in particular you think are going to transform?
I think like obviously AI is a transformative of technology currently. I don't think we really know how to harness the power of AI yet. It's interesting because we're having this conversation just a week after the leadership summit that was on in California, and there AI was very topical. But like at the same time, the whole ET was on the stage, and they were asked what are they using it for, and the vast majority of them are using it to help them write English, and that's not where the transformative power is. Now, our CEO quoted that was maybe not the best use of the compute that it takes to run large language models and the likes. But it is, as an assistant to people in their daily lives, it has a major transformative power. We see it, however, also having a major transformative power in how our engineers will develop and design their systems. It will not replace the need for engineering. I don't think that will ever be possible. And I think there's many misnomers about how much more efficient it will make you as an engineer. But we do see that it will help. So it will. One of the things we're investigating now, for example, is putting AI capabilities into our development flows and our development pipelines. And what we believe that will help with is it will provide let's say there's a failure, it will provide with that failure some kind of first triaging. Yeah. So that kind of work that you have to do to go and get logs from here, there, everywhere, and go through them, and that it would have that information consolidated and will provide a more kind of rich view of what the failure is. So it will speed people up. It will just take away some of that, the time doing mundane kind of things. And as it gets more intelligent, it may also be able to get to the root of the failures more easily. So AI is obviously a transformative power. We, however, would also believe that 5G is a transformative technology. So we believe as a company that that 5G itself will enable industries to rethink how they operate. We as a company would believe a lot about something like around differentiated connectivity, so where you can kind of slice your network and you can provide slices of your network to particular use cases. So there's one like a stadium use case where after a big concert or something or match at a stadium that
I'm thinking Taylor Swift concert.
I'm thinking Cork winning the All Ireland, but we can do either. It's anyway, you come out and you're looking for a taxi or something, or you're looking for an Uber, and you can't get an Uber because the network is down because there's so much load on the network. So what we see like is that can be there will be a potential, or 5G can enable you to create a dedicated slice that say Uber have that's provided to Uber from an operator, so they're guaranteed connectivity separate to the rest. One of our kind of growing business areas will be another example of that. Much more, what would you say, important aspect of that will be something like in America we have FirstNet, which is like a dedicated network for first responders.
Yeah.
But instead of actually deploying a dedicated network, you basically gave a capability, you give a dedicated, and you allocate a set of resources within a network that's dedicated to first responders. So because if you just like, it's a bit scary what happens when disasters start happening now, and how many people are say taking videos, pictures, sharing, etc. That takes so much resources from a network. So what you do is you basically say, no matter what happens, the people who need the network most have access, and then the rest of the resources are shared around to everybody else in a kind of a more standard basis. So we see kind of like the need for mobile broadband isn't reducing, it's going to continue to increase, but the monetization of that is going to be quite challenged, or maybe it's not a growth area, say, in that respect. So that's one of the things that we work on, is this kind of really opening up that 5G itself, with its latency capabilities or with its low latency, it can do so much more than, say, what 4G did. So we really believe it's a platform of innovation, and we spend a good bit of time on that. Even if you just take currently, there is an engagement ongoing locally in Athlone between Tree and Toos, looking at with a dedicated 5G standalone network, and looking at how to do things like there's a autonomous tractor, for example. That's one of the use cases that they're using it on. So there's actually a recent short video on that you can find on YouTube on that engagement. So we spend quite a bit of effort making that kind of technology take off.
The autonomous tractor.
I'll
definitely have to have a look.
In Roscommon, exactly. Yeah.
I shall definitely have a look.
Yeah.
Listen, that was fascinating. Thank you so much, Denis. I'm so delighted you came into us.
Thank you very
today.
much for having me. Yeah.
I'm intrigued by so much of that technology. Thanks a million.
No problem. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.